off by giving a
Sorry.
That's fine. I'll just start off by giving a description of you and your career highlights so far, and then I've basically got a list of questions that I'd like to ask you about your current success with Jupiter as well as your previous successes, especially Citrus Pay in particular, and the USP of your product, your advice for others who are also looking to operate in the fintech space, things like that. So that should take about 30 to 40 minutes, and then we can open up the Q&A for the rest of the time.
Sure, sounds good. I'm happy to introduce myself, just to save you extra work.
Okay, I mean, I please don't skip over your accomplishments, because that's what us listeners are here for. And I've got a couple of paragraphs on those. So yeah, why don't Thomas, can he just go ahead now, and then I'll add to whatever he says.
Sure, let's jump right into it. So hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for this keynote event with Jiten. Very happy to have him in today. He's got 2 startups that he's been involved with, Citrus Pay and Jupiter. If you haven't already checked them out, when I was reading about them, it's very, very interesting. He's even had a $100 million exit from Citrus Pay, which is very, very exciting. So we're very, very lucky to get him in today. Hardik will be leading today's session with the questions. So if you have a question halfway through, members, please message him or myself, and we can pass them on to the speaker. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Thomas. I'm the president of NSOC this year. And I was going to say quickly, we've got 2 events coming up over the next 2 days. Check us out on Facebook and Instagram to keep up to date with us. And if you haven't already, buy a membership for the year. It's only £3. And that's about it. I think we should just get started, really. So very well welcome to Jiten. I think he said he wants to introduce himself first. So let's just get started.
Sure. Thanks, Thomas, for great background. Just to quick introduce, my experience has been in financial services now for almost 18 plus years. For first 7 years of my career, I worked with a private sector bank in India, ICICI Bank. And I was fortunate to work with the bank at a time when ICICI was turning itself from a institutional bank to a retail bank. So I had seen the first-hand super exponential growth month on month and year on year. So most of my learnings I still attribute to my formative years of career in ICICI, because I think it was a great institution to learn or start my career. 2010, which is 7 years after I worked in ICICI, I quit ICICI and I moved on to my next journey, which is Citrus Pay. So I ran the company for 5 years, and the idea was very simple. The idea was my bet was on the industry rather than myself, to be honest. So I believe that the industry will do very, very well in next 10 years. And if you are in the industry, you will make something out of it. So that was my bet. So when I left ICICI, I did not have any background of how we will be different, what we will do, what will be our first product. But I'm like, I want to be in the online payments industry anyhow. So, and I think the thesis proved out right in hindsight. Though we managed to innovate quite a few things to the market. So our thesis was like, how do we simplify the online checkout experience for consumers and solve the problem of conversion rates and all of that. And within that, we introduced many first to the market. So like in India, there was no concept of card on file. So we were the first one who introduced that concept to India market. There was this no concept of aggregating various acquiring gateways, so that if one acquiring gateway has a problem, you could route the transaction to Visa, MasterCard through alternate route, basically drive the more conversion rates. Then no payments companies used to invest in the data science platform. So we were the one who invested into that and created unique capabilities out of that. which again helped us in more conversions, creating new products out of that. So after running 5 years, we sold the company to Naspers, and that was pretty good exit considering it was one of the first fintech exit in India market back then. I regret it now though. So the market has changed significantly. And we, after selling, exiting, I launched India's first pay later product as well, Lazy Pay, which was, by the way, that continues to be the largest pay later product in India. We acquired like million plus consumers within 2 years of launch, doing like more than 3 million transactions every month. The pay later as a concept was like not known to, I would say, 99.9% of people in India in 2016. So yeah, so that's, and now it has become a very common buzzword. So we did launch that. And 2019, I quit PayU, which was an Naspers India payment arm, and I launched Jupiter. Basically, the idea is very simple, that how do we provide the overall finance experience to the consumer rather than being monoline towards payments or lending and all of that. And I think one of the big realization which I have had after 10 years in fintech is that if you want to create a very large business in financial services, then you got to establish trust relationship with the consumer. If you have a transacting relationship with the consumer, then it's unlikely that you would like it. Considering the depth of the market in India, it's difficult to create very large business in a sustainable way. And I think that's how my realization was, and that's how this whole idea of neobank, which we are doing. Yeah, that's it from an intro standpoint.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that introduction. I'll just add another detail which you kind of skipped past actually. So is that despite starting Jupiter in 2019, I believe, you have already raised more than $71 million in funding. And that includes some of the biggest investors in the world like Sequoia Capital, Matrix Partners, and Nubank Brazil, which is perhaps South America's most successful fintech. So it's a pleasure having you here. I've watched videos online of people hosting other big fintech celebrities from India like Kunal Shah. It's a pleasure for me to be hosting such a big celebrity myself. So thank you.
Sure. Yeah.
Moving on with the questions. So could you please tell us what your most recent venture, Jupiter Money, is all about? Because online it says that it's a new banking experience for Indian millennials, right? But could you please elaborate how it's different from something like Paytm, whose British equivalent would be something like Monzo or Revolut, and what your USP is over there?
Sure. So I think I would sort of put Jupiter on more on lines of Revolut or Monzo per se, rather than Paytm. I think Paytm, if you ask in India any consumer what is Paytm all about, they still associate Paytm with a wallet or a recharge company. So Paytm is still not being associated as a bank. While if you ask consumers who heard about Jupiter, they associate Jupiter more like a bank. So that's one of the big difference from a perception standpoint. But how we are different, or what is a unique proposition? I think today, if you look at the Jupiter vision, is very simple. That we want to become the day-to-day finance app for the consumer, and we feel that bank account is our entry point, and the reason we chose bank account as the entry point, which is the hardest sell, because this account is the relationship with the consumer, which actually creates trust. You park your money, you trust that entity, and if you trust that entity, creating any fintech business on top of that is like way easier. I'll give you some data points. Like in India, 70% of lending still happens through banks. 90% of insurance is sold through banks. 70% of investment products are being sold through banks. And by the way, they are very suboptimal in all three segments. And that happens because customer inherently trusts his bank. And I think that is the unique relationship which a customer has with their bank. So that's why we went after this harder path, but because we felt that the rewards are huge if we become successful in winning this path. So that's one. Second, we feel that finances are very, very personalized to everyone. And today, the financial services providers are selling you finances without understanding your overall finances. Like a bank might be selling me a $1,500 credit line without understanding that I don't need $1,500 credit line. Just because they have my data, they're selling me. So I think that is the big problem statement what a consumer sees, where since the advisors, financial advisors don't know 360-degree finances of the consumers, they sell very irrelevant or non-contextual products. And by Jupiter, we want to do banking and financial service experience very, very personalized and very, very contextual. And this is why one of our unique offering in the product is where you can aggregate all your finances at single place. So you can operate not only Jupiter account, but you can operate your other bank accounts as well through our app. So that's the thing which we have delivered to the consumer, which customers are really liking it.
Thank you so much for that. So, you've established that there's an element of trust that you've incorporated, and that yours is more of a personalized experience as compared to current platforms like Paytm. On that note, you said that the entry point for you is banks. So in the UK, for example, I personally have found that banking is very easy. So I've got a very convenient Barclays app where I can see what transactions are going on, and I can see what money is being debited out of my account or credited to my account. Why would you say has that not happened so much in Southeast Asia? Because you've got banks like HDFC Bank, which happens to be the 10th largest in the world. So why is it that they haven't been so successful at this yet with their mobile app technology? And why is it that there is a need for companies like Paytm and Jupiter instead?
Sure. So I would say that in India, the banks have done fairly good job compared to other parts of the world because their stack is just 20-25 years old. Vis-a-vis other parts of the world, the stack is like 50-year-old. So the backend stack. So I think that way they are more nimble, more agile in their operating style. That being said, I think the real difference is of talent. Where in bank, if you look at the profile of people handling, let's say, technology, they might be commerce graduates, or they might be just like marketing guys handling technology. Or if you look at the product folks, they are mainly like project managers. They don't have any DNA of product. But the world has changed in last 5 years, specifically in a market like India, where the customers have experienced real consumer products. They have seen apps like Amazon, Swiggy, Zomato, and all of that. So their expectation of their banking experience has accelerated, or has gone to a very different curve, and which is where the banks have not caught up. And I think that is, so well, you can do everything basic you want to do with your bank, but I think the customer expectation has changed. So where the customer wants a great service, they don't want to call a call center and wait for the resolution or be in the queue. They want everything instant. Like the Amazon provides you everything instant from a service standpoint. That's the expectation customer has. Or they want a same experience, so like search, reviews, ratings, recommendations. They want all these experiences in banking, which is just non-existent today. So I think so it is not bank's fault in my view. It is more of a customer evolution which happened faster than expected.
Right. That's wonderful. So thank you for elaborating on that. in addition, your company Jupiter has received tens of millions of dollars in funding from some of the leading players in the space, and this without a very serious product launch, right? Without actually having acquired the kind of numbers that a company like Paytm has acquired. So this is obviously because of your personal profile and because of what you've accomplished in the past. However, if you were starting out today, let's say as a 25-year-old with a limited amount of personal cash and without the kind of big name that you currently have, how would you go about doing the same thing? I mean, because in that case, it would be difficult to raise, tens of millions of dollars without your pre-existing branding. So how would you have gone about this whole process differently in that case?
Sure. So I think it's an unfortunate thing that in a market like India, for a 25-year-old to do anything in banking is virtually impossible. And this is the unfortunate part. And the reason it is impossible because working with banks is like super tough. The bank folks who can make decisions are like in their 50s. So now to relate to a 25-year-old, their ideas, trust, credibility is a challenge, and this is a real challenge. So if I were to go back in time and sort of take a stab at it from a banking standpoint, I think I would choose the path of prepaid card and lending stack, and take that path to move into the banking side. But if you straight away wanting to take a banking stack path, you're sure to fail, in my view. So because it's so tough to tell those bankers that, hey, I'm the serious guy here.
Right. To add to that, you obviously had several years of investment banking experience with one of the largest private sector banks in Southeast Asia. And, so you sort of worked in finance and then you made it big in financial technology. So would you say that you wouldn't have been as successful if you hadn't worked in finance, say, if you'd worked in consumer goods earlier? And, to current graduates or, incoming people like myself and various others in our society, would you recommend that they work in a particular industry, get specialized expertise of that industry, and then try to start up in that particular sector if they want to make it big?
I would not agree with that. So, and the reason I would not agree with that, I think for many reasons actually. So, the first reason I would say that there is all certainly is a bit of a bias in terms of how things can be delivered to the consumer. And trust me, I had to be like consciously work on removing that bias from me. And like I'm like very, very conscious of that. So to sort of unlearn what I've learned in my banking days. So that is one. Unfortunately, guys like you were starting, I was thinking of starting now, you don't have that bias. That being said, my personal advice to anyone who's thinking of starting, and I think that's bias, I agree still, is that you should work in a startup, even if it is for a year. And the reason is it brings you so much of ground reality in terms of how chaotic and what all is needed to tackle. And these are the skills nobody teaches you. So especially in your college or university. But I think 1 year of startup experience is like as good as 5 years of corporate experience anyway. But that 1 year is gonna make you ready to deal with any eventualities. So you should work typically, my advice would be typically a Series A startup. And that will give you like a lot of exposure to make you successful in your own startup. I think there are examples, people have just directly out of college or even from college have made big, but the way I see is that they're exceptional. And there are few examples like that. So if you want to increase the probability of success, at least work 1 year.
Thank you for that. Thank you for answering that particular question. In addition to that, so these days in Southeast Asia, you sort of see some very big companies. You see BharatPay, which became a unicorn in about 2.5 years. We can see Jupiter itself, which has raised tens of millions of dollars. We can see Paytm, whose valuation is tens of billions of dollars. And we also have companies like Stripe, which is valued at about $100 billion, which is trying to move into these markets. And then you've got Ant Financial with its own controversies and its own massive success. You've got other fintechs in Indonesia as well. So for someone who's interested in the financial technology space in Southeast Asia, what would your current suggestions be? What are the things or the sectors that are still up for grabs, where there is a lot of noise, but where there is still scope for someone to move in and actually make a difference without 10 years of investment banking experience at ICICI Bank?
So you would be surprised that today in India, every month, at least 30 to 40 fintech companies are getting born every month. So what that means is there is a plenty of scope, and I must be investing one a month in fintechs, and I think that's the reality. So the unique thing which I'm seeing is that people are taking one problem, going deep into it, which is not possible for even fintechs like us to solve for or to focus on. Forget solve for, I think to focus on. So let's say, like I'll give you simple examples. Cross-border payments. Now there are too many nuances in that, like acceptance of payment options, money movement, regulatory scenario around that. Now we want to do cross-border payments, but I'm like, should I focus here versus there? Should we focus this versus that? But so there are these pockets available where one can just go deep, and from there then expand the horizon. I think that's the way to go about if somebody wants to pick it up as a new challenge.
So your advice is to people is to find their own niche.
Yeah, you pick up any problem which you can relate to first of all, or you can like find the pain point and first one or two customers. I think if you're able to do that, you should just like go deep.
Wonderful. In addition to that, you obviously have some American giants like Google Pay, which are also trying to make a dent in the Indian market. However, we can see that indigenous companies like Paytm have been a lot more successful. BharatPay is another excellent example. So in the future, do you see Amazon and Google taking up this payment space, which is considered to be worth potentially trillions of dollars? Or do you actually seeing it going to the indigenous companies?
I think this is anyone's guess, frankly. And by the way, I'm on board of BharatPay. So when Bharat started 2.5 years back, the thesis was that there is no role for this company. But what difference? And by the way, till date, if you ask me what is the product difference, there is none. It's a very, very commoditized product they have. Like, what is the product? QR code, sticker. That's the product. Like, how can you be different in sticker? Your sticker is same as as good as Google Pay sticker. So I think the real difference was the velocity of execution. So how fast you could acquire merchant. That was the only mode, and generally these are the things where others struggled in terms of their execution velocity, despite there was an intent, and BharatPay sort of accelerated ahead. So I think in a market like India, and especially payments, the innovation has happened to a great extent. And when you talk about the retail payments, so there is a new angle to find to success. Is slightly the bar is higher. So the only way to succeed is your execution velocity. So now whether it's an indigenous company or the multinational company, I think if they're able to execute, so like PhonePe is a classic example, right? Indian company scaled really, really well, having almost 50% market share in UPI payments now. While Amazon, despite spending a lot of money and has the captive pool of customers, they're not able to scale. So I think it's all factor of velocity.
So are you saying that you don't always need a USP or you don't always need a new idea? Because you said that Bharat Pay is has a very commoditized product, and just for our viewers to know, Bharat Pay is no small fish. Bharat Pay is a company that reached a valuation of $3 billion in about 2 years, making it one of the fastest and most successful unicorns of all time in the fintech space and perhaps in the world in general. So would you agree that it's not just the idea, but maybe it's more about the execution and, as you mentioned, the velocity with which you execute? So you can take a commodity product, a commodity service, and you can just execute it really well and execute it really fast.
I agree with that, by the way. I pay more value to execution than to idea. See, unfortunate part in India or market like India is that the ideas get copied very, very fast. So there is no uniqueness to the idea. What makes you unique is how good you're executing and how fast you're executing.
Right, right. And another interesting question that I'd like to ask is, that in Southeast Asia and in developing countries in general, there has been a trend of copying from the West and implementing it in India. So we've seen that with Flipkart, which tried to imitate Amazon. We can see that with Snapdeal, which tried to imitate eBay. However, we can also see it with Razorpay, which tried to imitate Stripe. However, would you say at this point, Southeast Asian fintech has finally caught up, and that maybe countries like India and Indonesia have more to offer than developed countries like the UK, even with their unicorns like Revolut and whatnot?
So I think it is. I think it is right that people have ported the business models of West into the Eastern world, but I would not use the word imitate, and I tell you why. Because if you look at the products which the companies you name have launched in India or Southeast Asia, those products are very, very suited to India market or the Southeast Asia market, and quite unique as well. I think if someone has just ported the product in the same way it has happened or it has been executed in US, they would fail miserably in a market like India. So I think uh, maybe the positioning is being made similar way, sound similar way, but the execution is very, very different and on the ground. So that's the thing which I've seen in reality.
Right. Okay, then thank you for that. And one last question that I had before moving on was, if a 25-year-old or even a 22-year-old has an idea today um, for some kind of innovation in the space of fintech, what would you say should their first steps be? Because at this point, everyone is trying to raise millions of dollars in funding. Uh, at what point would you say should they try to raise funds, and how should they go about the whole process? Should they do a soft launch first? Should they build an MVP? Should they get their first few customers?
So fortunately nowadays even paper plan gets funded very, very easily. So I think and like I'll give like real example. I know at least 10 companies which are like the guys are still in the job. They have this idea that, oh, I want to do this, and they have the term sheet in their hands. So it's the funding scenario right now is like pretty good. So this is the best time to be entrepreneur in my view. So I think that the success of your business is on you in current time, because you have the talent available, you have the funding available, and beyond that, you don't need anything. So if you're not able to execute the idea despite having all the resources at your disposal, that means there is something wrong in the way you are executing. So So if I were a 22-year-old, I think I would try my venture right away.
Right. Well, thank you for that so much. I'm done with my questions, and honestly, these were questions that I had from a personal standpoint as well. So having an expert answer them is it's one of the best things that could have possibly happened. But with that, I will now hand it over to our president, Thomas Morgan.
Hi, thanks so much, Hardik, for that. Really interesting to hear your story, Jitan, across all of it, and to see, what inspired you. And I guess that's where my first question is, what inspired you first to enter this space? Obviously, you had the background in the industry, but what first inspired you to go into this like fintech space and this innovation?
So I think yeah, you're right. My background definitely helped a lot to go into the fintech space. That being said, I'll say the reality is when I started first time, the fintech word did not exist. So like the fintech word got invented, I think in 2014, and my first venture was in 2011. So after 3 years, when I heard this word fintech, I was also sort of mesmerized by that and started using that word to raise more money. So yeah, so I would say that what inspired to start. I think the inspired to start was when we saw the problem statement. We saw that banks are not focusing enough because they're too big to focus on a verticalized problem statement. And that was the real reason I started my first company in payments, because when I asked uh, my internal folks at the bank that why are we not providing a great experience to these merchants, and they were like, don't worry, they don't have much options. That was the answer I got. So I'm like the feeling of or the understanding of pain was not there, or empathy was not there, and I'm like, you have to do one simple thing. You have to just develop the product and show empathy to the merchants, and the business is yours. I think it was like as simple as that. So that was the real motivation, and I think this entrepreneurship is kind of a drug. So once you are in it, you don't leave it, you find it like very very difficult to work in a corporate setup after that. So and that's why I keep saying, right, that work 1 year first before you jump onto this side, because after that you're not going to work back. So I think you should rather have both the experiences when and like rather than regretting that, oh, what that world looks like, I don't know.
Perfect. Thank you so much for answering my question. Sounds like great advice. Yeah, trying to explore both worlds, and see how they take you. But that leads me on a little bit for a question that we got from the audience, actually, and it's from Yash, who says you've had great achievements across your career. And I guess what were some of the hardest years and obstacles you've had to encounter, and how did you overcome these? I'm guessing, since you said at the beginning, since the industry didn't really start with your first venture, it didn't exist, you kind of entered a completely new space, a new domain. Was that kind of the hardest part of your journey, or was it maybe even now in your new company, your new startup, Jupiter?
So I think at every stage of journey, the challenges are different, or every time also the challenges are different. So when we started in 2011, the bar was very, very low from a problem solving standpoint, but the bar was very, very high from a hiring standpoint. Like to hire someone, we had to literally talk to the person, his family, his friends, tell that their job is safe, what is startup, and explain all of that. Like it is that era I'm talking about. Talk to the parents, wife, everyone to hire a single team member. So I think the funding scenario, like to raise $1 million back in 2011 was considered a very big thing. and now to raise 1 million, you just take like half an hour. So it is like that simple. So I think the things have changed. That being said, what has become difficult now is the bar of problem solving has gone higher. So earlier the bar of problem solving was so low that you, wherever you look consciously, you look at problem, you find problems. Now there are like so many companies trying to solve different parts of the problem. So you got to like think very hard the uniqueness of the problem solving or the vertical which you are going after. So yeah, so challenges are different at different stage, and how you overcome is like depending on the like circumstances. So it the response come natural. So as I said, like when the hiring was a problem statement, the response was natural. Let's give comfort to parents. Let's give comfort to the wife or spouse or friends. Influence through that. And the funding, the response was natural. Let's conserve. So like I still remember our first funding was 1.8 million in 2011. We survived on that funding for 30 months before we raised our next round. Nowadays, if you raise 1.8 million, within 6 months, you're back in the market and like running out of cash very soon. So I think things like it's a generation of time difference. The problem statements changes.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. I guess that kind of leads on talking about, raising all this money, and how quick these companies grow. There's another question from Chris who says, do you see crypto payments gaining steam in the Indian fintech industry? And I guess even in the region, do you see this being the next big hub for fintech? What do your personal opinions on that really entail?
So definitely, while I don't invest in crypto coins, I do invest in crypto companies because I'm clearly seeing the lot of innovation happening, and it's a natural product market fit. So you don't have to do much effort to get users. There is a enough demand from a user side. So clearly there is a breakout happening in that space. So and like the companies, and I get surprised by looking at the companies. There are these 5 companies in crypto space in India and Singapore, which I know have got users, so like 10 million users plus. Now, for a fintech company in payments or a standard fiat currency fintech company to get 10 million users is like very hard, and crypto companies get it like in a year's time. So yeah, so that's a unique thing. Similarly, in the gaming, there's a real revenue people are making, which was like 4 years back. If you had asked me that, is there a scope for gaming companies in India, I would have been the first guy to say, no, there is no scope to monetize. But now when I look at it, like the companies are making revenues within first year anywhere from 10 million to $100 million. So the market has changed. So definitely the large companies will come out in both these segments you talked about, and it'll keep coming out considering the market is still at a very nascent stage.
Okay, thank you. And another question from the audience, just asking, what is your proudest achievement to date, career-wise? Yeah, that's a very open-ended soft one, really.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. I think I'm more known still as a for my citrus journey because that journey was unique in the sense when we started, there was no market in terms of the industry was very small. The payments market was controlled heavily by banks. So that was difficult to create another payments company. So yeah, so I see that journey, and as I said, the funding scenario, talent scenario was very difficult. So navigating that, and returning money to investors with like 8-10x return within a span of 4 years. I think at that point it was considered a big achievement. Now it looks very trivial, uh, but yeah, I would still consider that when I look back as one of the like pride feeling I get.
Yeah, and that's one of the highlight. That is the highlight of your career, really. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Nice. And really, I think that these on. There's no other questions I think from the audience, DM to me, but I think my last question is we ask everyone that comes in here. What's your like final piece of closing advice for everyone here? You kind of answered a little bit. You know, you want people to maybe explore the corporate world at least a little bit before jumping into this space. But what is your advice, you know, to succeed or to enter this industry for all of these students here today that want to be involved maybe in startup culture or have their own startups in the future?
So I would say only one thing, you know, when you sort of, the chances of your success increases when you lose out on, or when you shed away fear of failure. And I think that's real, I'm telling you. So, and I continue to believe in this in last 10 years. So when I left ICICI, everybody was shocked around me that I was doing well in my career, and I'm like trying to do a startup, which is a space dominated by banks. Everybody sort of anticipated that I'll fail. Even I knew I'll fail. But I was like, what is going to happen if I fail? Nothing. I'll come back to the corporate world. And I think losing that, the shedding away that fear was the real reason for success. Similarly, now in Jupiter, like the credibility is there, the stakes are higher, and everybody feels that in a market like India, there's no scope for neobank. The banks are doing good job. Uh, Customers won't trust neobank, and I'm like, I'm okay to fail. It's okay. Worst case, what I learn that I failed, and these are the reasons I failed. So when you shed away that fear, I think you give your best, and your probability of success increases. That's my biggest learning.
Thank you. Thank you so much. That's all the questions really from me, but really for myself. Thank you, Jitendra, for coming in today and speaking to all these students. It was a real pleasure to have you here. And to everyone in the audience, thank you for coming. If you've got any other questions, feel free to shoot me a message or reach out to Jitendra. I'm sure we can pass on any questions that come up afterwards. But if that's all from you guys, thank you for coming in once again. And it was a pleasure to hear about your journey through the fintech space in India. I wish you all the best for the future.
Sure, Thomas. Really appreciate, and yeah, it's great listening to the provoking questions. So, it's a nice interaction.
All right. Thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in, and we'll see you all at our event tomorrow at 6. Take care and take care.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks,
everybody. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.